Stop sign disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental. The story contains themes of romance, emotional conflict, and personal growth. It is created within YouTube's guidelines and is suitable for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. Emily Rivera, a 28-year-old executive assistant, had worked at Blackstone and Hartley Marketing for nearly 3 years. Nestled in a sleek high-rise in downtown Manhattan, the company was known for its fast pace, intense demands, and luxurious image. Emily had grown used to the rhythm: early mornings, late nights, coffee-fueled meetings, and constant deadlines. But the one constant that truly stood out in her daily grind was her boss, Daniel Hartley. Daniel was the company's co-founder, in his mid-30s, with striking blue eyes, tailored suits, and a calm, composed demeanor that made him both respected and admired. He wasn't loud or boastful like many CEOs Emily had encountered. He was quiet, thoughtful, and, in some subtle way, intensely observant. He never said more than necessary, but whenever he spoke to her, there was a gentleness in his voice that others didn't receive. At first, Emily brushed it off as politeness. Later, she began to wonder. There were moments, brief, fleeting ones, that made her question if something unspoken existed between them. The way his gaze lingered just a second too long during team meetings. How their fingers had accidentally brushed once when passing a report, and neither had pulled away immediately. How he always remembered her favorite tea and made sure it was stocked in the break room. These moments didn't scream attraction, they whispered it. Emily, still healing from a painful breakup a year ago, had buried herself in her career to avoid emotional entanglements. Office romance was messy, especially when the man involved signed your paychecks. So she did what she thought was right. She smiled politely, stayed professional, and ignored the occasional flutter in her stomach. Her friends teased her often. "Come on, Em. You'd have to be blind not to notice how he looks at you," her best friend Tara once said. But Emily shook it off. Daniel was recently separated. His divorce wasn't finalized yet, and she didn't want to be a rebound or a regret. Besides, she wasn't sure if the attention she felt was even real or just her imagination playing tricks on a lonely heart. But then came that Thursday night, the night that started it all. The night he called. Up until that point, everything had been normal, mundane, even just routine. But behind those everyday interactions, something had been brewing. An invisible line neither dared to cross. A tension that hovered like electricity before a storm. Emily never expected that storm would hit so soon, or that it would start with the simple vibration of her phone lighting up late in the evening, with his name on the screen. It was 9:47 p.m. when Emily's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She was already in bed, curled up in her favorite hoodie, half watching a rerun of a romantic drama she'd seen a dozen times before. When she saw the caller ID, Daniel Hartley, her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a text. It was a direct call. She hesitated. Was this a mistake? Did he mean to call someone else? Her thumb hovered over the green accept button for a second longer than usual before she answered. Emily? His voice was steady but low, with a slight edge of hesitation. Yes, Mr. Hartley? She replied, suddenly formal, as if the walls between them had snapped back into place. I'm sorry to bother you so late, he said. I'm still at the office. I need a file from the shared drive that I think you still have access to. It's for the Geneva pitch tomorrow. I wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent. Her brain scrambled. She had, in fact, saved a copy of that file on her external drive, which was at home. But a part of her was curious. Why was he still at the office this late? And more importantly, why had he sounded off? I can email it to you, she offered quickly. There was a pause. I actually also wanted to ask if you had a minute to come by. There's something else I need to discuss in person. It's not about work. Emily sat up straighter. The line was quiet except for the faint hum of the city in the background. Her heart was racing now. Are you okay? She asked, concerned. I don't know, he replied softly. But I will be if you come. That sentence echoed in her chest like a secret, Against her better judgment, she said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Throwing on a jacket over her loungewear and quickly brushing her hair, Emily told herself she was only going because it might be important. Maybe it was a personal emergency. Maybe he needed help. She didn't want to overthink it. The elevator ride up to the 27th floor of the office building was eerily quiet. When the doors slid open, she stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Most of the lights were off, except for the soft glow coming from Daniel's corner office. She walked in slowly. He was sitting behind his desk, the city skyline glowing behind him. He looked up, surprised and grateful. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said quietly, standing up. Emily crossed her arms, unsure whether to smile or keep her guard up. "You said it wasn't just about work." Daniel gave a slight nod and gestured toward the small seating area in the corner. "There's tea. I remembered you don't drink coffee at night." That small gesture disarmed her more than anything else could have. She sat down, and then he looked at her, really looked at her, and said the words that would unravel everything she thought she knew about him, her job, and maybe even herself. Emily sat rigidly in the sleek leather chair, clutching the warm ceramic mug Daniel had placed in her hands. The chamomile tea was comforting, but the tension in the room made it hard to enjoy. The city skyline behind him glittered like stars trapped in glass. Yet inside that office, the air felt heavy, thick with silence and anticipation. Daniel sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands folded, staring at the floor like he was rehearsing something in his head. Finally, he looked up, his eyes no longer calm and composed like they were in meetings. Tonight they were uncertain, human. "I've been trying to figure out the right time, or if there even is a right time," he began, his voice low, barely rising above the soft hum of the HVAC system. "But time keeps passing, and this hasn't gone away." Emily frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, exhaled, and gave a small, helpless smile, the kind a man wears when he's caught between duty and desire. I mean you." The words hit her like a quiet thunderclap. "I think about you more than I should," he continued, now looking her straight in the eyes. "I notice everything. How you always organize your notes in color codes. How you tap your pen when you're thinking hard. How you always offer to help the interns even when no one's watching. And I keep pretending it's just professional respect. But it's not." Emily blinked, heart thudding so loudly she thought he might hear it. "Daniel," she whispered, unsure what to say. "I know this is inappropriate." He cut in, voice trembling now. "I know I'm your boss. I've spent months convincing myself it's just a phase. A crush. Something that will pass if I bury myself in work. But every time I see you walk into my office, every time you smile at me in meetings, I feel like I'm losing that battle." She stared at him, stunned. She hadn't imagined it. The lingering glances, the softness in his voice, the little things. None of it was in her head. It was real. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. "I'm not trying to manipulate you or make your job uncomfortable. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed you to know, and I'll respect whatever you decide. If you want distance, I'll give it. If you want me to forget this conversation ever happened, I will." Emily's mind was a whirlwind of emotion. Flattered, confused, cautious, intrigued. A part of her wanted to lean into the moment, to feel something real again after so long. But another part screamed about rules, reputations, and the thin line they were crossing. She placed the mug down slowly, searching for words, her voice soft but steady. "You're right. This changes things. But I'm not sure if it's in the way either of us expects." Daniel didn't push. He just nodded slowly. And for a moment, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. 2 days passed after Daniel's confession, and the office air felt different. Denser, quieter, charged with things unsaid. Emily kept her distance, but not in a cold way. More like someone walking through fog, unsure of what was ahead. Daniel, true to his word, didn't push. He greeted her as usual during morning check-ins and discussed projects like nothing had happened. But his eyes still held the weight of that night. On the third evening, as Emily packed her things to leave, a text lit up her phone screen. Daniel, I know things are strange. If you'd be open to it, I'd like to talk again. No pressure. Just dinner. No expectations. She stared at the message for a full minute. Her first instinct was to ignore it, maintain the boundary, stay safe. But something inside her whispered, this isn't about danger. This is about truth. So, cautiously, she replied, one dinner, as friends. They met at a cozy little Italian place downtown, one of those restaurants tucked between modern towers where candles still flicker on tables and soft jazz hums in the background. Emily arrived first, already regretting wearing something that hugged her a little too well. When Daniel walked in, he wasn't in his usual business suit, just jeans and a navy sweater. He looked like someone she'd want to sit beside on a park bench for hours. Over appetizers, they spoke about harmless things, books, travel, the chaos of New York. But as the main course arrived, the conversation took a deeper turn. He spoke about his recent separation. Claire and I had been growing apart for years, he admitted. The marriage was more of a partnership than a relationship. And I kept thinking if we just worked harder, tried harder, it could be saved. But some things just end. Emily listened quietly. He wasn't playing the victim. He wasn't trashing his ex. He was just being human. Then he turned the spotlight on her. You hide your loneliness well, Emily, he said gently. But I see it. That made her throat tighten. No one had said that to her. Not since her last heartbreak. Not since she learned to mask everything with structure and busyness. They shared dessert, just one, because Daniel remembered she didn't like overly sweet things. Bittersweet, he said with a small smile. Like most things that matter, when the check came, they both reached for it and laughed. For a moment it felt normal, easy. But as they stepped outside into the cool night air, reality crept back in. Emily looked at him and asked softly, where does this leave us? Daniel paused. I don't know, but tonight didn't feel like a mistake. She didn't answer. She just nodded slowly, heart beating louder than the city traffic around them. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But when they parted ways, something between them had shifted. What began as forbidden had now become undeniable. The following Monday, Emily walked into the office with a fresh layer of anxiety coating her skin. She tried to convince herself that their dinner had been innocent, that two adults sharing food and conversation wasn't a scandal. But the looks she started receiving from coworkers told her otherwise. It started with whispers. Two interns quickly ended their chat the moment she walked into the break room. A senior manager gave her a look. Not rude, but definitely knowing. Even Monica, her closest colleague on the floor, hesitated when Emily invited her for coffee like they used to do every afternoon. Maybe later, she said with a polite, forced smile. Emily wasn't stupid. She knew what was happening. Someone had seen them at dinner. Maybe a client, maybe a coworker's friend, and the office rumor machine had spun into overdrive. The story had grown legs, then wings, and in a world where perception often outweighed reality, she suddenly found herself under a microscope. What hurt more was how quickly her identity shifted in people's eyes. She was no longer the efficient, reliable Emily who organized campaigns and saved deadlines. She was now the assistant who might be sleeping with the boss. Daniel noticed too. His tone was more careful in meetings. His conversations with her kept public and brief. He was protecting her, she realized, but the distance stung more than the gossip. By Wednesday, things escalated further. HR called her in for a routine check-in. Though the tone in questions made it clear this was about more than performance. They asked if she felt comfortable at work, whether Daniel had ever made inappropriate advances, and if she had any concerns about boundaries. Emily answered truthfully. There had been no misconduct, no pressure, no abuse of power. But the implication was clear. People had begun assuming the worst. Later that day, she found herself standing in front of the office window, looking out at the crowded city below, wondering how something so emotionally honest, so innocent, even, could cause so much wreckage. She wasn't angry at Daniel. Not really. He had kept his distance out of respect. But part of her wished he would do something, say something to silence the noise. Still, he remained the professional figure he'd always been. That night, she sat in her apartment with a glass of wine, scrolling through job postings. Was it time to leave? Had she already lost her credibility here? A text from Daniel popped up. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. If you want me to transfer you to another team or write a recommendation, I will. Just say the word." She stared at the message, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. Not because of the situation, but because of the kindness, the sincerity. She didn't respond that night, but deep inside, something was shifting. This wasn't just about work anymore. It was about identity, dignity, and the cost of following your heart in a world that demands silence. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Daniel slowly drifted into silence. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of distance that grows in between unspoken words and unsent messages. The same man who once noticed every shade in her voice now barely glanced her way in meetings. And Emily, who used to memorize his coffee schedule, no longer passed by his office at all. Daniel didn't reach out again, and Emily didn't respond to his last message. It wasn't anger that kept them apart. It was the echo of the chaos that followed. The looks, the rumors, the questions from HR. They'd both learned that feelings, no matter how honest, had consequences when tangled with power and perception. Emily threw herself into work. She took on more tasks, volunteered for extra projects, and even began mentoring a few of the younger staff members. Her days became busier, louder, fuller. But her nights, those were quiet. Too quiet. Sometimes, as she stared at her ceiling before sleep, she would replay moments from that dinner. The way Daniel had smiled over dessert, how gently he had said her name, and how for a brief few hours, she had felt truly seen. She dated again once or twice. Nice men. Safe choices. But none of them stirred anything real in her. Not the way he had. Not even close. At work, she noticed Daniel becoming quieter too. He started delegating more. He skipped the Friday meetings he used to lead with enthusiasm. His spark had dulled, and though they didn't talk, Emily knew it wasn't about workload or stress. It was about them. One evening, while walking home through Central Park, Emily found herself thinking not about what they had done wrong, but about what they had never given themselves permission to explore. She realized something important that night. Not about Daniel, but about herself. She had always played it safe. Her last relationship had ended because she had stayed quiet when she should have fought. Her dreams of writing had faded because she took the stable job instead. And now, with Daniel, the moment she felt something real, she buried it under professionalism and fear. She wasn't blaming herself. She was just waking up. The next morning, she stepped into the office like she always did. But this time, she didn't avoid Daniel's gaze when he passed her in the hallway. Their eyes met, briefly, and something unsaid passed between them. That afternoon, she received an automated email from HR. Daniel Hartley has formally resigned from his role, effective next week. Her hands trembled as she read the words. She immediately opened her inbox to check for a message from him. There was nothing. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. But she knew better. He was giving her space to move on. Or maybe he was walking away to make room for something that wasn't burdened by titles, rumors, or boardrooms. Still, her heart sank, because this time the distance felt final. It was a quiet Friday evening. One of those early spring nights when the city's chill begins to soften but hasn't completely let go. Emily stayed late at the office, not because she had to, but because she didn't want to go home yet. The space Daniel once occupied was already empty. His name removed from the glass door, his shelves stripped bare, the room echoing with silence. She hadn't spoken to him in over 2 weeks. No calls, no messages, no closure. As she shut down her computer and began to pack up, a soft ping echoed from her laptop. One new email. The subject line read, "In case you're still curious." Her breath caught in her throat. The sender, Daniel Hartley. She clicked it open, her pulse racing. "Emily, I wasn't sure if I should write. You've probably had enough drama, enough whispers, enough of me. But there's something I couldn't leave unsaid. Not if I wanted to walk away with peace in my chest. You once told me that nothing ever feels like a mistake if we learn from it. I've learned a lot these past months. I've learned how one moment of truth can unravel years of carefully built walls. I've learned how messy and beautiful honesty can be. I resigned not because I was running away, but because I realized something. I don't want to be your boss. I don't want to be a title in your life. I want to be something real if you'll let me. No expectations. No pressure. Just one chance. If you still feel even a fraction of what I felt that night, meet me at the place we had dinner, the little Italian spot. Sunday, 7 p.m. If you don't come, I'll understand. Either way, thank you for waking something in me that had been asleep for too long. Always, Daniel. Emily stared at the screen, her heart thudding against her ribs. The room around her faded. All that remained was the weight of the words, and the door they quietly opened. She read the email 3 times, then closed her laptop and sat still, unsure whether to cry or smile. This wasn't a romantic movie moment. There were no dramatic speeches, no chasing through airports. It was just a man, stripped of status and ego, laying his heart on the line. And her? She had spent weeks questioning everything. Her role, her reputation, her desires. But here it was, the crossroads. One more choice. One more moment where she could either protect her comfort or step into something uncertain but deeply human. Sunday, 7 p.m. She whispered the words like a secret to herself. She had 48 hours to decide if she was ready to stop being afraid and start living for herself. The cursor blinked on her screen. The world waited. The Italian restaurant looked exactly the same, warm lights glowing through frosted windows, soft jazz filtering into the street, and the scent of garlic and basil floating on the evening breeze. Emily stood across the street for several minutes before crossing. She wasn't late, but her heart felt like it had been racing for hours. She had debated coming. Every part of her life, the careful boundaries, the hard-earned respect, the routines she clung to, all warned her not to do this. And yet, none of that had filled the ache she'd been carrying since Daniel left. She wasn't just showing up for him. She was showing up for herself. When she finally stepped through the door, her eyes scanned the room. He was there. Daniel sat at a corner table, just like before, nursing a glass of wine and looking nervous in a way she had never seen him before. Gone was the polished CEO. This was just a man, vulnerable, waiting. Their eyes met. No words yet, just the kind of look that says, I hoped you would come, and I wasn't sure you would. He stood as she approached. Hi, he said, with a smile that reached his eyes. Hi, she replied, taking the seat across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need to rush, no company clock ticking, no roles to play, just 2 people finally meeting without walls between them. I didn't know if you'd come, he admitted. I almost didn't, she confessed. But I realized I've spent too much of my life making decisions based on fear. Daniel nodded slowly, visibly relieved. Me too. They talked for hours. Not about work or rumors or office politics, but about books they loved, childhood memories, secret dreams. It felt less like a date and more like the continuation of a story that had been paused, waiting for the right time to unfold. At one point, Daniel reached across the table, slowly, gently, giving her a chance to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers met and held. No promises were made that night. No forever whispered under candlelight. But something much more honest passed between them, a choice. Not to chase perfection. Not to erase the past. But to start something real on their own terms in their own time. When they stepped out onto the sidewalk, the night had grown quiet. Daniel looked at her and said, This time, I want to do it right. Emily smiled. Then let's not rush it. Let's just begin. They walked off into the city, not as boss and assistant, not as a scandal or a story, but simply as 2 people who had found courage in the most unexpected place. Each other. And that, sometimes, is where the truest love begins.